You started a career path and have been grinding away, maybe all the way to the top. But you've decided the career you've dedicated your life to isn't the career you want to dedicate your life to. Now is just the beginning. Starting out or starting fresh. It's time to become the Work Experience Kid. Will this be the last episode of the Work Experience Kid podcast? Will I fall in love with high school teaching that I just pack up all of the equipment and say, I am done with podcasting? Well, it's too early to say that because I have no idea what it takes to become a high school maths teacher. That's why we're speaking with Taz Herman. And not only is he a high school maths teacher, he is a teacher at a democratic school. What the hell is a democratic school? So now we're going to learn two things, what that is and what it takes to become a teacher. I've got to remind you that this pod only becomes better thanks to you and your support. Firstly, thank you for your support. Thanks for listening. You can also help out by sharing it with friends and family, giving it a rating as well. You could also even jump on the pod, and especially while we don't have any official sponsors, I'm happy to shout out your project, especially if it's your side project. Speaking with listeners, they love hearing what other people are doing and supporting them. Also, if you'd like to support our previous guests, visit the website workexperiencekid.com. There's a guest tab, and that website is where you can support the pod in other ways, like getting involved, etc. Let's start the pod with Taz Herman. Taz, thanks for joining me. Let's start by finding out what it is you're doing now.
Currently, I am a secondary school mathematics teacher. I'm at a small, independent, democratic school, and I've been here for about 2 and a bit years.
Sorry, I'm asking dumb questions straight off the bat. What's a democratic school?
A democratic school, in comparison to a normal public school, is a school where students have more of a voice within the school. There's different ways that's implemented, but one of the main ways is if there's a certain thing that we want to implement, like a policy or a particular subject or module that's different to the mainstream, it gets taken down to a vote throughout the students, and then majority votes will either get that policy implemented or that new module or subject into the actual school itself, or maybe a term or a semester. So there's cool ways that democracy could be implemented within the school. So it was a different experience when I first stumbled across it when I first started here, but it's awesome to see, and it's quite refreshing.
You mentioned policies get brought in. What sort of thing would you take to the students and the parents to vote on?
I think one of the main ones lately is use of technology and use of mobile phones within classrooms, what's deemed acceptable and what's not. It's easy for, say, teachers to just implement some type of rule and say, you're not allowed to use your phone between this time and this time. It has to be in your locker or goes to the front office. At this school, we have a different approach. We try to brainstorm what the best approach to mobile phone and technology use is. And then we spit out some ideas. Some students might bring something up. And then there's a few, I guess, different trajectories that rules being implemented to come into play. We take it to a vote after discussion, and then that gets implemented. So rather than someone saying, this is what it's meant to be, the students have that autonomy to talk about it, which is really, really good because it gives them a sense of voice and a sense of identity that their opinions actually matter.
Well, that sounds fair enough. The kids are more likely to abide by the rules because even if the adults kind of try to influence the kids into a certain decision, at least the kids have that buy-in. We see that with government and different ideas there where you can implement a rule, but the people are like, oh, the government's telling me what to do, I don't want to do it. But then you put that in the hands of the citizens and the citizens come up with that same idea and they're all about it. So I totally get how that would work.
Yeah, it's a really good system to see. And that's just one of many examples. There's other, I guess, different policies around uniform. We don't really have a uniform at this school. There's no bells like a traditional school. So there's this real kind of free-flowing feeling of being at the school. Something as simple as like the teachers being called by their first name rather than Mr. or Mrs. That's also another a refreshing feel to the school as well. So it might seem a bit abstract or weird for some, but for me, it honestly feels like home. I quite love it.
And are the students feeling like they're being treated like adults?
Yeah, you see it a lot, especially in the senior school. So there's two campuses that I work at, and I'm at the senior level. So predominantly year 10, year 11, and year 12. They have a sense of independence. And during recess and lunchtime, they're allowed to leave the school and walk down the street and grab something to eat or go to the library if they need to. I know there are some public schools that do that, but at this school, it's just so implemented in our day-to-day lifestyle that it's so normal to see. And maturity levels are quite high. It's easy to have good discussions with them. That's not trivial. Discussions about video games are cool, but also discussions about their views on life and politics. It's so bizarre to see at first when you do see it, but yeah, it's now become second nature that when I do talk to a student from a public school system, I forget how much maturity has gone through our students. It's, yeah, quite nice to see.
So you definitely recommend the democratic system compared to the regular public school from what you just said?
For sure, yeah, from both a student and a teacher perspective. But again, it's not everyone's cup of tea as well. I know that there are some students who really like being given direction and being told what to do because they kind of rely on that. And weirdly, that was me as a student when I was growing up. And then, some teachers also don't like some of the kind of free flowing, flexible approaches to the curriculum. So I quite enjoy it here, and the people that I work with and the students that are here, they love it too. It makes a really strong community. But you either as a teacher or as a student will have to have that experience firsthand to know what it's like to see if it is for you. But if it is for you, it's a really, really nice, enriching experience to be here.
Just quickly on you said that some students depend on let's call it the rigidity of public school. Is that partly to do with like home life? They might not have necessarily a good home life, but they come to school and have the discipline they need. Could we say that is part of it?
I think that's one part of it. Another part is there's a sense of comfort and security in structure. Where there is structure within this school, mostly in the junior school, there's a lot of spare lessons or spare periods where they don't have a class. And so some students are like, oh gosh, what do I do with this time? I can do whatever I want. I can just go on my phone, or I can play some games on my laptop. Students feel a bit lost if they have that such freedom that they actually quite like being told what to do and where to go. I guess home life may have an influence. Maybe if they do have an unstructured life at home and they feel uncomfortable, maybe they do rely on school for that. But maybe it's also like kind of a reflection on like, if I have structure, I will have good grades because that's probably what they need, or that's how they function while growing up from a kid to an adolescent. So it could be a variety of things. You've probably hit one of them, but there could be more to it. And that's still something I'm still discovering, seeing kids come to this school and be like, oh, the school setting is not for me. I'm quite under a magnifying glass because it's such a small school. Maybe I just kind of want to be lost in a crowd and just follow a bit of a structure at a public school system. So yeah, it really depends on, I guess, upbringing and family dynamics. There's a lot of influences that go to seeing if this school's a good fit for you or a public school system.
And it's a relatively new thing, right? So it's going to take some time for you as teachers and staff to figure out how to integrate kids. You've done it for a couple of years, but there's still a lot of learning, I'd imagine.
Yeah, there is. Some kids blend in seamlessly without even realizing that they're such a good fit. It's such a natural process for them. And then there are others who just feel kind of uncomfortable and, they're either too scared to talk because it's such a small school. I don't have more than 5 or 6 students in a class that if they talk, it's highlighted what they say. Everyone is listening. And that's a very intimidating feeling. Or others kind of showcase who they are and they're like, yeah, I'm top dog. And then it just gets highlighted how bizarre and odd of a position that is to say something like that. And so they're
sure. I do want to learn more about being a high school teacher. There's one thing that you said that has really stuck out to me, and I feel like I can't move on without asking you. There are no bells. How do you know when to move on?
People use watches.
What? In this day and age? Watches? Well, so basically you're at the front of the class going, all right, it's, 10:20, we've got to go in 2 minutes, so wrap up what you're doing.
Pretty much, yeah. It's people I've been pulled up on this by students. They'll tell me, the class is already finished because I'm just like on a roll with my teaching or my explaining. They're really good because I mostly do senior classes. A lot of them have drilled in knowing how to coordinate their own time and their own learning, which is a really, really tricky skill set to teach explicitly. So I think doing something like removing the bows and having them be self-reliant on time management, you chip away at it year after year after year, but when they get to senior years, they're really good at it. They instinctively know, okay, yep, this should head towards the end of the class. Cool, we're about 5 minutes in, so I can work on this piece of work for 5 minutes and then I can go to recess or lunchtime and I can prepare myself for the next class. It's such a bizarre thing to see at first. And you would think that taking or removing a bow is like counterproductive to that, but it actually isn't.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Let's get back into your actual life now. You've been doing this democratic school for what you said, 2 years. How long have you been a teacher?
Officially, I had my teaching license from the start of 2013. So I finished my degree 2012, but I only started properly teaching in 2015, and I started in London, of all places.
What took you to London? And are there any differences in how you teach London, England, compared to here in Australia?
The basics, like the curriculum is different, the year level structure is different. There's a difference in culture as well. Like there's all these little things that when you put them together, you see how vastly different it is from London in comparison to Australia. So yes, there was a difference. It was a bit of a culture shock to get thrown into it. Why London? Things had not gone to plan in my career prior to 2015. My wife, girlfriend back at the time, she brought up the idea, how about we go to London? Because she's a primary school teacher. She had just got her degree. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's apply for our visas and let's go there. So it was a bit of a sporadic decision. We didn't have any kids. We didn't have a mortgage. We had no loans. So we decided, let's do it. And so we went there and taught there for nearly 2 years, just shy of 2 years. It was a good experience. It was a very exposing experience. It's a bit sad to see how some of the schools are in London. It feels like at times they're like lions kind of trapped in cages. And yeah, you don't want to mess with the padlock because if you open it, then it's all chaos will ensue. And yeah, some crazy stories, some dark stories, but some good times as well. Yeah, it was a bizarre and thrilling experience at the same time.
I can imagine what some of those experiences might be, just from what I've seen on TV and whatever. And obviously, there's a whole lot more that you don't get exposed to just through media. Did you always want to be a teacher?
I think retrospectively, I knew I had the skill set for it. But at the end of year 12, when everyone, you talk to your career counselor and you see what other people wanted to do once they were finished, I wanted to get into industrial design or product design. I actually did that in university. I did industrial design for a year and a half. I didn't like it, and then made a decision to transition into my math studies, which then got me into my teaching degree.
What about industrial design didn't you like?
It was a combination of two things. I think it was the way that the course was run. It wasn't to what I expected. There were some elements of it that were really cool, like the computer 3D modeling, the real engineering math side to it. That was awesome. And then the other side, the ways that creativity was taught. Maybe I was a bit naive because I went into the degree when I was 17 and I was with people that were like 20 to 70. So I think I had a bit of an experience in that aspect. But I perceived industrial design being one thing, but it presented itself to be something else. And then that was laid with a lack of job security as well. Once you finish, you can either work for a company, but it's very competitive, or you can start your own brand, and that was scary in itself. So I thought, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I just came into making this decision a bit too fast, and I should have really thought this one through. But when I was in year 12, I was like, yeah, I'm a good drawer. Sure, let's get into design. And then reality hit and you're like, oh, okay, maybe this is not for me. So Yeah, did a bit of a 180 and decided to go into the maths teaching trajectory.
So you went straight into maths teaching?
I went straight into my mathematics degree. So I did my Bachelor of Science mathematics for 3 years. And then I did my postgraduate degree in teaching for a year. So you needed to have a minimum 3-year bachelor degree before you can get your teaching degree. Well, that was for the university I went to, anyways.
That's a bit different now, I think, with the government wanting more teachers, isn't it?
Yeah, they've made some modifications into how you can get into teaching. There's different ways that you can, which I'm a little bit unfamiliar with because I got my teaching degree almost nearly 12, 13 years ago. But there are some programs that I did see when I was in the public school system. There are uni students who are doing their teaching degree who essentially worked at a school as well. There was like some type of programs that you can do those things at the same time, just because there was a bit of a teacher shortage. So they were trying to almost fast track uni teaching students to become teachers straight away. So, and then I'm sure there are other ways in which you can become a teacher as well that were a lot different to when I did it. So that, though, I'm not entirely too sure. I'd have to do my research on that one.
That's fine. That's for me to do my research if I want to get into it. So you wanted to get into industrial design. Was there anything else you wanted to get into when you were growing up, or you just enjoyed the drawing and that was your natural progression?
I think that was my natural progression. I was kind of a bit unsure about what my proper career plan was going to be when I was at the end of year 12. I guess, especially during year 12, I kind of went into autopilot. I knew I was good at maths. I did my advanced maths and just pushed on through. And a lot of people, especially family, were like, oh, why don't you become an accountant or do accounting of some sort? That's got maths involved, which it does. But the finance and economic side, in my mind anyways, back then, I thought was a bit of a completely different niche that I wasn't really interested in. Then there was a scientific route, get into engineering. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really a science person. So I thought maths, while I was good at it, had to be complemented with something else. So I was like, let's get into industrial design because I like drawing and I didn't really fully think it through.
That's a great, obvious step. You're good at maths, you're good at drawing. Industrial design seems like a nice fit.
I thought it was, yeah. If I had did a bit more research, I would have, seen if there were any other type of courses that were more on the engineering mathematical side to it. I think for me that would have been a bit more enjoyable. How my life trajectory would have gone, on career pathway would have gone had I made that choice, I'm not entirely too sure. But yeah, I guess you're right. Industrial design seems like the most natural progression, considering I like design and I like maths.
I know nothing about the industry, but also you didn't really know too much either. You don't really know until you know. You get into it and go, this isn't for me, and it obviously turned out to not be for you. You just touched on your career progression. What's your career progression as a teacher?
I literally started my teaching career in London. I did a few substitute teaching jobs prior to that, just to kind of get some money and save up. But properly career-wise, went to London. I did a few substitute teaching jobs there at the start. They call it supply teaching there. Such a weird word, supply, like, supply and demand. It was I don't know, when I first heard it, I was like, that's a supply teaching. Why are we just on this conveyor belt and you just grab a teacher and chuck them in a classroom? So I did teaching for just shy of 2 years. So we left at the start of 2015. We got back around September 2016. And then there was this last kind of term and a bit, term 4, where we were like, oh, what do we do? We can do some substitute teaching work, but do we want to try to look for something a bit more secure in terms of job security moving forward into 2017, or do we go traveling again? And we were kind of at this crossroads because we did our travel part, we did a lot of traveling while we were in London. We decided that we should settle down. My wife ended up getting a position at a primary school in the Basque Coast area, which then led me to look for a school which was within that area or close by. So I ended up getting a school at a public school, and I was there for about 6.5 years. And then I made the transition to the current independent school that I'm at now. And I've been here for 2.5, getting close to 3 years, I think, coming next year.
Okay, you've had a good career. It's a different one to what I imagine a lot of other teachers might have had. They, go straight into teaching degree, and then they come out the other side and they look for work in a school and they stay there for 50 years and then they retire.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much the most natural progression of the teaching lifestyle. Yes.
Broadly speaking, what do you love about the industry? What keeps bringing you back into the classroom?
I'm not going to lie about this one. When I was at the public school, I was at my sixth year. I was thinking about making my transition and shifting not into a new school, but just out of the industry. I didn't know how to approach that. I didn't know what to do because I didn't know what a new skill set I had to learn if I had to go back to TAFE or university. And I was a bit lost with that choice. But the school that I'm in now, the thing that keeps drawing me back, I think it's the sense of community and all the small modifications we were talking about before that the school runs in comparison to like the main strict public schools, like the no bows, no uniforms, all the trivial things that public school teachers have to worry about. I don't have to worry about those type of problems. That keeps bringing me back because then it allows me to focus on the one true thing that I love, and that's teaching mathematics. I don't have to worry about if a student's sock color is wrong or if they've put green in their hair. Like all those things just I did not care about when I was in the public school system. So to have that flexibility here in students to be able to show their true identity, that keeps drawing me back. I like to see them be who they are. And I think if this school didn't scout me, I think I would have completed a bookkeeping degree. I actually was doing online studies while I was a full-time teacher. I decided to do bookkeeping online. I finished that degree about a month ago, which is really good. So that's kept me busy. And I think I would have just gone in that trajectory. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky question to answer because I do love some aspects of the industry, and there are aspects of teaching which I do love, but I was on my way out. But luckily the school scouted me.
That's a common thing though, right? That's part of the reason why there's a teacher shortage. Teachers aren't being looked after, they're not finding the culture fit, they find all these challenges, and all it takes is, in your situation, a different mode of education that retains you. If we were looking at, what can we call it, a professional industry where you go up to an office, work 9 to 5 and then go home again, if the culture's not a good fit, you'll find somewhere else to go. So we should expect the same for teachers. So you're a great example of that.
I do feel blessed with where I am now. And I honestly, I'm not one to say this type of thing, but I can see myself working at this school for the rest of my life. And that sense of clarity is something that I have never felt before. It's, I pinch myself once in a while just to be like, is this really happening? Am I actually in this school? But it also works the same way. I can imagine anyways. I was such a right fit for the school as well. And they needed me, obviously my math teaching ability, but they needed me in the sense that I was a good fit. I can talk really well with the students. I'm not just a math teacher. I'm actually just a good, kind human being. And that this school that I'm working at can really make me feel that way, where working in the public school system did not. So I'm very, very grateful that I'm here.
This whole podcast is about me learning what it's like to work in different jobs across different industries. And I'd love to discuss obviously the pros, but also the cons to a job. But also for anyone listening who is thinking about becoming a teacher, they might see a traditional education system and say, this isn't necessarily for me. And that could be turning them off, but to see that there are other opportunities. And they might even see this democratic school and go, that's not for me. I would prefer a more traditional school. So it's good to shine lights in different areas. And I feel like I'm going to have to get more teachers on because there are a whole lot of questions that I have and there's no shortage of experiences. Over your whole career so far, do you have any standout memories?
I did a 6-month stint at an all-girls private school in London. And so I only had 3 classes, a year 7, 8, and 9 class. They were really, really lovely students. They made me feel really welcome. I was a bit nervous about working at a private school setting because I hadn't done it before, and it being my first proper teaching gig where I was actually named in the payroll. So that was scary, but There were a lovely bunch of students. They made me feel really welcome. I did my thing. And then on the last day, the contract had finished up. The year nine students, they wanted to have a class party. And so I was like, yeah, we can have a class party because it was a private school. Teachers were pretty strict there. So every time they asked for a class party, they would always say no. I didn't know that. So I said yes. And they were like, oh, he said yes, yes, yeah, he said yes. Oh, I can't believe he actually said yes. So I was like, oh, okay. So, all the girls brought in food and snacks and stuff to eat. And then there were these two students, these two girls, they wanted to take a picture of me with the class as a little memento. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure, you can. I had a digital camera. So they took the picture. And then I was like, all right, cool, picture's taken. Let's continue on with the class party. And the two girls that took the picture, they said they wanted to go to the toilet. And I was like, okay. I thought that was a bit weird because, they decided on a class party for the last class and they wanted to go to the toilet. That's cool. But they could have gone in another class because they're limiting how much free time they have with,
Yeah.
eating junk food and not doing schoolwork. So I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, you can go to the toilet. They were there for quite a long time. And me and the other students were kind of sitting there and, they didn't want to touch any of the food. They didn't want to start the party. And I'm like, oh, are we going to wait until the girls come back until we start the class party? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Can I have a Smartie? And they were like, no. It's like, oh, okay. And so we kind of just sat there awkwardly. And I'm like, what's going on? And then I started getting into like teacher panic mode. I'm like, oh, maybe something bad has happened, or they got into trouble because they were walking with like a digital camera and then they were going to relay it back to me, and then I'm going to get into trouble, even though it's my last day. But what they were doing was they sent that picture that they had of the class with me in it. They sent that picture to their laptop. Then they had to send it from their laptop to the printer in the library just for them to stick that picture on a farewell card that they had signed for me.
Oh, that's
So when I
nice.
received, yeah, it was such a beautiful thing. I teared up after that class left. So it's weird to think in that time that I had such a capacity to have an effect on those people. Even though I was there for 6 months, I changed their views on maths in one way or another. I had a few students tell me in that class that, their problem solving abilities had increased or had gotten better because I was there. There was some moments in life that really define your true character, and that small farewell card, that was one of them.
You started this by saying it was a positive experience, and here I was going, those bitches, they've dobbed on you. And then I was like, they were year nine girls, so that a little while ago now they've grown up now, they're adults. I hope they're in jail. And I was like plotting their demise. I think that's partly because I'm a Gemini and that's just what I do. But then, hey, that's a very nice story. I'm so happy to hear it turned out that way.
That was quite humbling. It was really nice, and I found that picture probably a year ago. I put it in the garage, and I saw it, and I'm like, oh, I totally forgot, and all the little signatures that they had, and all the little nice messages that they had on the card now. So yeah, it was a bit of a throwback. It was like, whoa, I was in the midst, being a full-time teacher and a dad and a husband, and then when I saw that, it took me back. Sometimes I forget that those moments happen, and even when you prompted the question, I was like, ah, yeah, that was a good time.
So we can tell that you're happy reliving that moment as well. I can hear it in your voice. If I can rug you from your good experience, what's a negative memory over your career so far?
I was on lunchtime duty out in the Oval, and the school that I was teaching at, there was about 1,200 students. So it was a very, very big school in comparison to the amount of students that I'm at now, which is only 60. So
Oh, wow,
it's
yeah.
yeah, it's vastly big. It's huge. And usually I kick the football with the students and play a little bit of footy. Now, to give some context, most of the students that were out there were mostly year nine and year 10 boys that were out on the field. And we had just come out of our last COVID lockdown, probably about 4 or 5 months ago. That context is important because a lot of these kids that were in year nine and year 10, they kind of missed out on 2.5 years of proper socializing. They were locked in their houses and they were kind of forced to do study, which none of them did. So they were just kind of trailing on through school. A lot of them were ready to just when they hit their right age, wanted to just move on and progress into the next part of their life. School wasn't a right fit for them. But because of that mindset that a group of those kids have, it changes their outlook on life and their demeanor. So I didn't want to get into the psychology behind it, but that just to give you a bit of context. So while I was kicking the footy, they kind of started roughhousing a bit. A lot of them did play football outside of school. And I always had this rule that, a bit of roughhouse is fine as long as it's, mutual, everyone agrees upon it. There was a school rule that said, no tackling. You don't want to cause any of the kids to be injured because I have a duty of care. But if an odd tackle here or there and it was a bit passive, that was okay. I didn't mind it. So that was fine. We were kicking the football. And then one of the students had accidentally ripped another student's shirt. He was just tugging and he tugged a little bit too strong. And the kid who had his shirt ripped just absolutely lost it and pushed this guy to the ground. And then once he pushed that guy to the ground, I reckon about 40 year 10 students saw what was happening. Big year 10 boys, by the way. And I'm the only one there. I don't have the biggest body. I do go to the gym, but some of them were quite towering. A lot of them just jumped in and it was this massive brawl. Now, as a teacher, I felt really, really nervous because I didn't know what to do. So obviously I was screaming, stop fighting. There were like kicks going to the head. I was scared someone was going to have a concussion or get knocked out. It was so scary. And more kids like were turning their head and it was drawing a lot of attention. And because of that, it created a bit of a bunch of spectators looking. And so all these E10s are just running on. They see like kids getting pushed over and punched. So they thought they could try to get away with murder and they were just punching each other at random. Some of them were play fighting. Others were getting into real fights. And I'm the only one there. By now, there's like about 100 kids on the field. I'm the only one on this oval. And I'm like, oh, gosh. So I had to call up the front office and I said, we have a fight on the oval. I need backup immediately. They then send a message over the PA system saying we need all staff to this oval immediately, which draws more attention because then people who are not at the oval were like, oh, there must be a fight going on. All of a sudden, we've got nearly like 300 kids that are just looking at this brawl happening on the oval. And so I'm trying to separate people and the other teachers eventually they come. All it took was the principal to come and then everyone just kind of stopped. And then like the aftermath was just this ripped clothes, broken shoes, bruised faces. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is not what I signed up for. So that was just like one day. This happened multiple times. Probably not to that extent, but whenever I did oval duty during lunchtime, it caused a bit of anxiety. I didn't like it.
Yeah,
as you can imagine.
Fair enough. I remember back in high school, you just opened a whole can of worms in my mind of like they'd be fighting. It was always on the oval, and then this is before mobile phones were a thing, but somehow kids at the other end of the school would hear about it and run straight there. I'd hate to be a teacher in that situation. Obviously, you've lived it, and it's not a good experience. While we're down memory lane, do you have a spectacular failure you can share with me?
This one's a bit of a funny one. I just had my second kid. He was about 4 or 5 months old, so I had come back to teaching after my bit of a break. Still doing long nights, so I was very sleep deprived. And that caused me to have this inability to properly write my letters on the whiteboard, amongst other things like teaching properly. And I was teaching a year 11 mathematics class. And they were awesome class. So the behavioral wise, they were awesome. They wanted to be in math methods. And I'm writing some stuff on the board. I write all my equations, some examples. And then on the whiteboard, I wrote, if you need any help with this task, just flick me an email. Now, when I write my letters, I spell my words. They're all in capital letters. This is just a thing that I've done since I was year 7, and it's just carried out into my teaching. And when I wrote the word flick, I had put the L and the I very close together. And so one of my students in the back started giggling, which led to whispers in the class, and then everybody started giggling. I squinted my eyes at them and I was getting very self-conscious. I'm like, why are these guys giggling? I'm like looking down at my pants as my zip untied. Like, I got something in my hair. And one of the students said, "Sir, I'm not going to fuck you an email." And the whole class erupted in laughter. Oh, and at that point, I was just like, oh, God, I have no idea what you're on about. And then I turned behind. I was like, oh, okay, I wrote fuck.
Oh, good thing your name's not Clint. You could have had a double banger there. Oh, that's a funny
Yikes,
one.
yeah.
And that's obviously because you're dealing with kids as well. Adults would have a little chuckle about it, but they probably would let that slide. But kids just grab onto something and they take it, don't they?
Oh, yeah, they roll with it. And luckily, because it was a good class, it was just a one-time thing. It didn't become this inside joke or anything. It was just happened in that class.
Yeah, awesome. We've spoken about a few positives, especially at the top. We've gone down memory lane. What don't you like about the industry? And maybe a double up to this question is, what would you change or what would you like to see?
From my experience in the public school system, the thing that I didn't like was the amount of classes you're expected to teach versus how much planning time you get. That was very skewed. Because a lot of the people who are not in the industry, they think that planning time just consists of just planning for your next classes. But that time also consists of correcting and marking tests. If you run a test, you get to the end of a unit and you're teaching 5 classes, you're correcting 90 to 100 tests within that one time. And you've only got a limited amount of time to do that, which is why a lot of teachers take their tests home. So that was very skewed. There's correcting and marking, there's resource making and research. You can have your planning time, but there might be some additional resources that you might need for like a practical class of some sort. Then you might have to do some further research to see if it ties into the curriculum as well. There's professional development reflection as well. Maybe there could be some professional development courses that teachers do that might integrate some new form of technology. So maybe you want to use your planning time to say, oh, okay, maybe I want to try that. Let's do some research. And then an hour later, you still don't understand why you can't log into a particular website. There's all your planning time gone. There's also attendance chase up, parents and guardians, doing some follow-up emails, both positive and negative news. There's behavioral management follow-ups as well, which are usually handballed to the year level coordinators, but because they've been inundated with heaps of reports, it's expected for the classroom teacher to follow up on the smaller stuff. So all of that, it gets really taxing, and you're trying to figure out why particular classes aren't as organized or as efficient or as smooth or as good as you wanted or expected it to be, because you're wondering where most of your planning time is going. So that there is one thing I didn't like about the public school system. And a lot of teachers, especially in the public school system, might feel as though that they bring their work home with them to try to compensate for the lack of time that they get, and then it starts chewing into their personal time, and then that can kind of cause rifts between partners and spouses and family. The amount of days where I've like tried to power cram so much work within my day so I didn't take any work home with me, just for me to end up collapsing on the floor while I was playing with my kids, and they're like, Dad, wake up, what are you doing? We're playing. It can get really, really tiring really fast. And it gets easier as you get more and more resources prepared that you can rinse and recycle, especially at the start.
Yeah, okay. Very much time-based. And the good thing is your maths, so, there's really only one answer. Obviously, you want to make sure the kid is understanding what they're doing. But I'm just thinking how horrible it would be marking essays as an English teacher.
Oh yeah, I've seen some English teachers who work non-stop, especially in the senior and working non-stop during their school holidays. So it's not really a holiday break for them. They're just grateful that they've got that spare time to be able to mark it, where other teachers might have this philosophy that they don't want to do any work during their designated time off, so they'll leave it for school time, which comes at a cost. I look at some teachers and they're marking essays, and it takes them like a really, really good feedback to give to a student for an essay will take them an hour an essay. And if they're teaching 3 senior classes, then that's a lot of time.
Jeepers, yeah. I want to unpack a little bit more about this when we learn about if I could be a teacher. Before we get into that, I have to remind you of the Memory Maker podcast. It's something cool that Ed Calishaw is doing, and while we have no official sponsor on the pod, I want to tell you about it. The Memory Maker podcast is a nice way for you to capture the stories of loved ones in your life, maybe even your story, capture all the good and bad, or just the adventure of life, and that way you can share that with family members. You can even go back and listen to the stories told by your grandparent whenever you want to. The Memory Maker podcast is not a podcast just like this is a podcast. It's a piece of audio that you get to share with whoever you want. It's private, unless of course you decide to publish it. If you like the sound of the Memory Maker podcast, visit the website workexperiencekid.com, find the guest tab, and then head to Ed Calishaw. Taz, it's now time for me to figure out if this teaching life is for me. Let's start with what a typical day or a week might look like in your role.
I have to ensure that all my resources are readily available according to a predetermined schedule that I've created, and that is mapped against the Victorian curriculum. The Victorian curriculum tells me what particular strands of topics and subjects that I have to teach, and it tells me what success criteria a student is expected to achieve throughout that year. So I've been doing it for so long, so I've got everything all organized, and I can just go ahead, grab my resources, print them out, and make sure that they're all ready for the day or for the week. But it's all the smaller things that's around teaching that will take the most time. So some of it is admin and attendance. Some of them is making sure that materials are available. I know in a public school system, it's expected for students to bring their own resources like pencil case, pens, pencils, rulers, exercise book, etc. But at the school that I'm at, we provide all of those resources. So I have to make sure that there are some pencils that need sharpening or rulers that need to be used within that class. I have to make sure that everything's all ready. Making sure that my resources or PowerPoint slides, more specifically, they're all completed. And the lesson, for the most part, is engaging and relatable. And that engaging and relatable, that's the thing that changes from class to class and from year to year, because it really depends on the student's interests. I find this the most challenging, but also the most rewarding part of teaching, making sure that you can find why a particular subject is deemed important. It feels like at times you're trying to showcase or sell a particular product. Sometimes in the public school system as well, you might have a challenging class. You might have, say, for instance, a year 8 class that's quite noisy, and there's maybe a few students that might trigger each other off, in terms of like banter, or they're upset with each other. So sometimes before class, I'll have to make sure that if I'm going to implement a seating arrangement of some sort, I'll have to rearrange the classroom in a particular way, because the public school system, or at least the school that I was at, I wasn't given a designated room. We just kind of bounced around from room to room, depending on which year level you taught. So the class that I would walk in, the chairs and tables might be put in a particular order or way that doesn't work well for my class or my cohort of students. So yeah, it's all these little things, making sure that everything's all set up.
Seems like you're doing a whole lot of work that isn't actually teaching.
Yeah, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it beforehand. And I feel like sometimes there's more time dedicated to preparation than the actual teaching time itself. And then a lot of beginning teachers also have reflection time afterwards, just to kind of decompress if they've had a tricky class, or talk about what worked well and what didn't work so well. If you're assigned to a new school, you would generally have a mentor teacher with you. And that mentor teacher will sometimes sit in a class, and they'll break down their observation of what they saw. So they might pick up on little things that they notice that beginning teacher can work on or improve on.
Who are you working with day to day? Starting out, you've got a mentor teacher and I imagine other staff, but who else are you working with?
In the school setting that I'm at now, there is this obvious difference between the role of a teacher and the role of a student within a school setting. But with this school, outside of the classroom, because we try to keep everything so cohesive and try to make this place as non-hierarchical as possible, I work with everybody on a day-to-day basis. So I work with students and teachers, but we kind of see each other on the same level. Before I was saying all the students call all the teachers by their first name, gives this kind of sense of balance and there's no power shift of some sort. For me, teachers, obviously, every teacher in the school has their role, whether it's they're teaching a particular subject or whether they have like a student leader role or a administration role, or whether there's emotional and well-being role or integration aid roles as well. If you want to see it as a non-student space, these are the people that I'm working with. The school that I'm at, we don't call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves mentors. It's just a bit of a more realistic label for this school setting. So I work with mentors and assistant mentors. And we've also had some students who had finished last year, they've graduated and they've come back to help out with additional help. So I've got a past student who's in some of my classes. We run some modules. 3D printing is one of the modules that we were both in. We bought a 3D printer, and some of the tasks that we've done is try to look for things for around the school to 3D print. And so working with him has been really, really cool. It's been awesome. He's been such a awesome help. And then there's obviously the students.
Can I just quickly go back to a question I should have asked you? Why are we learning maths? Especially the shit I learned. I did maths methods in year 11 and 12, and I have not used a single bit of it. Actually, I had to measure the height of a tree. That's the only time I've used it, and the internet helped me there.
I've had this discussions with many students, hundreds of students over the years. And sometimes I can agree and empathize with them. There are times where I challenge what's in the curriculum and why particular maths content is taught. For me, I'm always going to have this appreciation for maths. I always love what you can use the maths tools for, what you can discover, and how it can be implemented in so many fields that are out there. But if you're looking into, say, a year 8 class who's learning algebra, if they're not going to use that particular skill set in their chosen career pathway, then yes, what they're learning is deemed redundant. For me as an educator, for someone who's trying to teach this, I'll be honest with them and I'll be upfront and I would say, look, this particular subject of algebra that we're going to learn now, yes, there are letters involved and it gets confusing. Why do we use letters in maths? I don't want you to have that lens on of why we use this. I want you to have the lens of, can I use the problem solving abilities in this class and translate that into problem solving somewhere else? And my aim isn't to get students to try to become a mathematical dictionary. My aim is to try to get students to better their logic and better their problem solving skills. It so happens that the context that I had to do it with does tie in with the Victorian curriculum, and it can be challenging at most times. But as long as they can understand the other skill sets that go along with it, and for some way or another, an appreciation for what it can do, then my job's done. I don't necessarily care if they get a good grade on their score, if they did an algebra test. I want them to walk away with being able to appreciate the skill set that they've learned from that. For you to measure a tree from the practical side, yeah, that's good. I think the people who run the creation of the curriculum, they've kind of honed in onto that within the last 5 years, more on the senior end. And they're trying to make sure that the math skills or more the numeracy skills is a bit more relevant to them now and to the fields that they choose to go into. There's a big push in the VM strand, which is the vocational major strand, there's a big push on trying to get financial literacy really prevalent within classrooms, because that's something that I did not get exposed to when I was younger.
That's huge, isn't it?
It's a massive thing. Yeah, proper tax brackets, understanding penalty rates within, working, what superannuation is, how do you apply for bank loans and stuff. These are topics that are now covered that weren't covered when I was in school like 15 to 20 years ago. So it's cool to see that that shift is happening, and to see it there. And I even try to implement these type of topics within my junior classes, for the very least they've got that bit of exposure to like at least the terminology or the key phrasing. Like, year 8 student might not know what superannuation is. I'll talk to them about it. The plan's been seeded. So when I see them again come year 11, year 12, I'll be like, if they can remember, do you remember that time we talked about superannuation? Oh yeah, that was that kind of like that investment that you can't touch until you're a certain age. Yeah, we're gonna hone in on that, and we're gonna delve into that a bit more. So
I wish I had learnt about compounding and compound interest back in year 7, because I wouldn't be looking for a new career right now. I'd be looking for a new yacht.
yes, yeah, a mansion. That's you want. You should have invested in Tesla. You silly.
Yeah, silly. Actually, I had a maths teacher in year 12. He was telling us all about how you can get a loan, buy shares, and then the loan interest becomes a tax deduction. And that was just too above our heads, because we probably needed some groundwork, but he was actually quite smart. And then, 10 years later, I'm like, oh, that's what he was getting at. Oh, if only I had some money back in the day to actually get into this. So it was quite good. I just didn't have the background knowledge to maybe support that. But hopefully now that's changing.
That's the tricky part of teaching as well. You're kind of pushing all this knowledge, not just for maths, but like all topics, with minimal exposure to the application side of it.
There are 2 complaints I hear: class sizes and too much work. What's the issue with class sizes?
It's pretty much a response to the lack of teachers that are out there. If the teaching rate, like, so people who go into teaching, get their teaching degree, and then become a teacher, if that rate declines while you also get an increase in population, then as a byproduct of that, you're going to have bigger class sizes. That's just an organic response to be able to deal with the sheer amount of students that at a school. I saw that in the public school that I was working at, especially just after COVID. We've had a lot of teachers that were calling sick. There'll be like 12 teachers who are absent. So those are the 12 classes that you need to get filled in. There are 12 substitute teachers that you need to get. And then if we can only get 6, what do we do for the other 6? You split them up, or you can just increase the class sizes. That's the only way to try to fit a proper ratio. And it's tricky because the bigger the class sizes, the harder it is to manage, which then in turn causes more stress and anxiety for teachers. So they end up bailing out, which then increases the ratio again. So you get this really bad, vicious negative cycle.
Then you add into that all the marking and all the prep that you need to do for extra kids in the class.
Yep. I didn't want to be that statistic. I wanted to be like, no, I can push through this. But when it started affecting my ability to properly function as a father and as a husband, and I was just feeling so tired, that's when I was like, yeah, I've got to swallow my pride, and I've got to try to figure out where my priorities lie. And I'm sure there are a lot of teachers who are in that same boat as well. It's a very tricky time in the education side for teachers.
And it seems like you're in a better space where you're able to manage your time a lot better. To keep going back to the public system, because that's obviously where one would more likely start, what hours are teachers working on a normal day? It might be hard to say. You mentioned English teachers are working, longer hours than, say, yourself or a PE teacher. But on an average, what do you reckon they're working?
You've got your normal in-house, whenever school starts, that can vary from 8:30 to 9, and then you finish at 3 to 3:30. If you chuck in a meeting of some sort, whether it's an all-school meeting, year-level coordination meeting, or subject meeting of some sort, that could push to 4:30. For me, I was looking at 8 to 9 hour day at school, and then an additional, at the start anyways, an additional 2 hours of planning and making sure all my resources were up to scratch. So some days I would, if I was really smart with my planning, I would just need to work for 8 hours a day. Some days would sometimes push to 11, especially around test time and exam time. Yeah, you're looking at 11 to 12-hour days sometimes as well. And then you can also, do you want to work on the weekends as well or during school holidays? It's hard to put a number to it because it kind of comes in ebbs and flows depending on the time of the year. Average it out, you're talking to 50 to 60 hours a week.
Okay, and we're recording this on school holidays. Teachers taking the school holidays, I feel like there's two types. You got some of those teachers are burnt out, so they need a holiday, so they take the holidays as holidays. And you've got another lot of teachers who are just working all the way through because they have a whole lot of backlog.
That is correct. And I've met both types of those teachers. And it really comes down to how much fuel each teacher has in the tank and what they need to fill their cup, really. Because some teachers will feel good or better about themselves if they are fully organized and they've got all their ducks in a row. And that in turn makes them, in their perspective, and maybe through other people's perspective, that makes them an effective or good teacher. Where you do have the other ones who do need to switch off and be able to just focus on family, focus on themselves, go out on holidays or do the things that makes them happy. And that in turn will make them feel refreshed and that will fill their cup. So then they come back after the holidays ready to teach and be considered an effective teacher as well. I try to find the balance. I want to be able to implement the right amount of time dedicated to planning, but also take advantage of the fact that my kids are on school holidays and my wife is on school holidays as well. And we want to utilize that time that we have off as best as possible. So I've done family time, I've done holidays, and I've also done a bit of admin stuff. And that for me fills up my cup because I can't go one way or the other.
Okay, it's a good insight into behind the scenes life. Never thought about it really. Like I know there's a whole lot of marking you need to do, a lot of prep you need to do, but yeah, really giving us a good insight. Do you think AI will help you in this area? And I guess second to that, how are you dealing with AI in the classroom?
AI is one of those things where we have been trying to teach the kids how to use AI successfully. It's always going to be a very tricky topic to discuss depending on who you talk to. From a mathematics standpoint, it's really cool. It's really powerful because it'll be able to analyze particular things and give me insights. Let's say a student did a particular test and I'm trying to figure out their way of thinking because they went one approach and I really want to try to diagnose that misconception. I've got a bit of exposure to knowing how people's way of thinking could be, but for a beginning teacher, they might be able to scan that test, tell AI, hey, what's going on here? This student had this approach. Can you try to give me some ideas as to why they thought this way? And it can give some really good insight into the way that they're thinking. And then so a teacher can use that to their advantage and be able to provide really good or proper feedback. That's the advantage of what AI can do from a teacher's perspective. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you might have students who can use AI and give it prompts to be able to tell it to write a particular essay, but don't make it too good. Just make it seem like as though that the teacher won't question whether AI was used for this. That's how powerful AI can be. And then that's not having them really learn the skill sets. If used properly and in the right ethical way, then it's awesome. But if used because we're just lazy, then I don't know what the trajectory is going to look like in like 5, maybe even 2 years time. I'm not too sure.
When the calculator was invented, teachers probably were like, oh, you shouldn't be using that. And then, when we were going through high school, there was more reliance on calculators. They were trying to get you to do it more mentally. But I feel like calculators are a thing, they're here to stay. AI is a thing, it's here to stay. Let's just see if we can integrate that nicely into how we're managing classes.
I've seen teachers in the public school system who say, don't rely on your phone for a calculator, where I'm the total opposite. I'm like, please know how to use your phone as a calculator, because once you're out in the workforce, you need to know exactly what it is you're calculating, even like small things like where to insert brackets and like use the interface on the calculators that you have on an iPhone or a Samsung. You need to know that skill set. I don't want to be the type of teacher who says don't use it because it's a school rule, and then they're like, oh, I really wish they taught us how to use a calculator on our phones in school. Like, so for me, I want to try to have them use it. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. I taught a student the other day. He was having trouble researching particular data, and he did some extensive research. He had a project where he was trying to see if there was a correlation between orangutan population and deforestation, and he couldn't extract that data. So he turned to AI and was like, look, can you see if you can find the right data for me, have the sources for me as well, so I can check those websites to see if it's credible. And AI did that. So you might be, losing some research skills or ability, but at the end of the day, I just needed him to get some data, which AI helped him with. And then he didn't use AI afterwards. He did what he needed to do with that data. So that was, in my head, ethically the correct way to use it, where someone else could have just been like, hey, can you just do this project for me and write the report for me? That's the wrong way. And we're trying to show them explicitly the difference between the two and why it's important to not have to rely on it.
That's a responsible skill or trait that you're showing these students. Speaking of skills and traits, what skills or traits does a good teacher have?
No matter who you ask, everyone has always got their perception of what a good teacher should look like, because they're drawing back on their own experiences as a student when they were younger, or as a teacher if they do go into the teaching field. You might even have kids who have parents who then share their experiences of what it was like for them as a student, and that might influence their answer. So the perception of what a good teacher involves will change from person to person. From my perspective, it's a combination of knowing how to communicate effectively to your crowd and also knowing your content and loving the content that you teach. I think that's very, very important. If you're just going to be a robot and teach from the textbook with no passion, then kids are going to see through that, because they're in that class against their own will. So, they're not there by choice, most of them anyways, in the junior side. So if you project that you don't really want to be there by choice, then I don't think that's being a good or an effective teacher. And the other trait to being a good teacher, and this is a very debatable one, is just being a good human being, just being kind and empathetic, and obviously know your boundaries between your professional relationship with students, but just showing that you're a human being. I've not even use that. I just am that. And I see a major difference perception wise of what students see in me as opposed to some other teachers. The content of what I teach kind of becomes irrelevant. If I'm a good human being, they're going to be drawn to me. And there was a piece of advice that I got from a principal. He said that any new class that you teach, students are going to want to kill you. But if you know how to get them on your side, they will kill for you. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's pretty profound. I've always had that in the back of my head. So it's kind of shifted my perspective on being this like really strict teacher that like talks down to them. That's very hard or rare for me to do. Just being a nice person, because then everything that follows from doing your job as a teacher, like being able to teach the content and the behavior, they will all naturally fall into place if you are a good human being. I think that's a good trait to have as a teacher.
And I think as a human being as well. I've worked in corporate that for some reason people feel like they can be assholes, but really at the end of the day, you're going to get a better product if you're just a nice person, whether you're teaching, doing a job, doing something else.
But also there's other secondary elements or traits that go well with being a good teacher as well, such as like the basics like organizational skills and time management. Those are the skills that you kind of have to learn from the ground up when you get into the teaching industry. But with that said, if you're not good with those types of things, then it might have a downside to how smooth a particular lesson or set of classes might go.
I have so many more questions, but maybe I'll save them for the next episode with you, the trial episode. I want you to set me a trial or a challenge shortly. But I also might have to get another teacher on to run me through some more questions because I'm also conscious of your time. Taz, this podcast is all about me trying out other jobs. I want to see if I have at least one skill to be a competent teacher. Can you set me a challenge to see if I have what it takes?
Yeah, of course, Ian. There's quite a few layers of tasks that you could do to see if you're a good teacher. But the one task I've got for you is I'm going to give you a year 11 data test that has been completed by a student. And your task is to make sure that you correct it and then provide feedback on that task and good feedback on that task to see how well they went within the test.
It's been a while since I was in year 11. Was that like 20 years? So let's see how I go. What does a good job look like in this challenge?
I think a good job is making sure that the feedback that you give is constructive, but not too harsh. And I'll let you in on a bit of an industry secret. It should be completed in a way that for every skill set a student didn't show, it needs to be balanced by two things that they did show or did do well. This is what we call the shit sandwich. Something that's good, something that you need to improve on, but then end it with something that you did good still. So it doesn't feel like as though that they're getting attacked by all these things that they've got to work on over and over and over again. You have to find that right balance. That's what I reckon makes a good job.
Okay. All right. Wish me luck. I want to come back to you in the next episode, the trial episode, and I want your thoughts to see if I have what it takes to be a high school maths teacher.
Of course. Looking forward to it, Ian.
How hard could it be? Or maybe that's the famous last words. The trial episode will be published directly after this one. So if you're not already subscribed to the Work Experience Kid podcast, do that so every new episode lands in your podcast feed. Remember, you can contribute and support the pod at workexperiencekid.com.